some awful, sad news that was broken in Scottish football, that the legendary Rangers goalkeeper Andy Goram had passed away, aged only 58, after a battle with cancer. It has been covered by the newspapers. The Mail on Sunday go with Rangers great Goram dies at 58. The Sun, Goram was one of a kind, that by Graham Bryce. And the Sunday Times says legendary goalkeeper Goram dies aged 58. And rather than talk about how the papers are reflecting on Goram, we thought it was better to bring in someone that knew him, and that is talkSPORT's Jim White. And you've joined us here in the studio. Morning, Jim.
I have, Jim. Natalie. Good morning, Tony. Good morning to you. As you rightly say, Natalie, very sad news when it came through yesterday. I'd actually been in touch with Andy's son, Danny, who'd been with Andy at the hospice in Glasgow at the tail end of last week. And on Thursday or Friday of last week, Natalie, Danny was intending to give me a few words on Andy's behalf, thanking the many, many football fans all around the country and beyond who had been passing on their best wishes to his dad. But unfortunately, at that time, Danny told me that Andy simply hadn't been well enough to do that. And then, as you say, the sad news yesterday came through about Andy's passing. It's very sad because, as you know, Tony, he was an extremely popular individual throughout the game. He was simply known to everybody as the goalie. Mm-hmm. And you remember that. You played against him, of course, at Celtic Park, and you found him tough to beat.
Yeah, and I bumped into him once in Glasgow in a bar, and he was with someone like Terry Erlock, and sort of I think Ali was around, Spackman, and he could tell he was a real lively lad. Like quite.
He sure was.
Yeah, he was, and to the end of his life, and he refused chemotherapy, didn't he?
Yes.
He chose not to do that, which was
yes.
He took his stance, and he knew. And he admitted it was the biggest challenge he'd ever fight, and unfortunately we've lost him. But a real character in the game,
A real character.
Yeah.
As you say, Tony, I mean, sadly the decline was quite rapid. I was up in Scotland last week at Turnberry in Ayrshire for the Stilian Petrov Golf Day, and everybody was talking about it then. Tributes yesterday, Natalie, came in from far and wide. Former Rangers boss Alex McLeish called him a wonderful character. In their statement, Rangers said in a 1999 supporters poll, he was voted the greatest Rangers goalkeeper of all time. And of course, as you know, Tony, he played for Hibs before Rangers. He played 163 games for Hibs before he signed for Rangers, and he was a key player for them. He was captain for a spell and even scored a goal from a huge kick out in a game against Morton. But it's when he went to Rangers he really made his name. If you remember, Tony, back in 91 he replaced Chris Woods, who Souness had signed as part of the early Rangers revolution. Chris Woods gave way to Goram, and Goram came in. He cost £1 million from Hibs, and he was an incredible shot stopper, Tony. Yeah. When you think of it, he was just so damn difficult to beat and goal. And I always remember his incredible performances in the 92-93 inaugural Champions League when they beat the then champions Leeds United to qualify for the tournament. And Goram, especially at Elland Road, was unbelievable. And he kept out Eric Cantona, who Wilkinson had signed for Leeds again and again and again. And for one of the few times in his career, Eric Cantona was totally frustrated with what he came up against. But it was his performances, and you'll remember this, Tony, his performances against Celtic in the Old Firm. This is why Rangers fans love him. Honestly, Natalie, he always raised his game against Celtic. And last night I spoke to remember Simon Donnelly, Tony, up at Celtic, former Celtic striker, and he told me, I had a chat with Simon last night. I met him up at the Petrov Golf Day last week. I was talking to Simon last night, and he said it was Simon's dream to play for Celtic. The only problem with that dream was he played for Celtic at a time that Goram was in goal for Rangers.
Yeah.
And that was a difference that Goram made. It used to frustrate the hell out of Celtic's players.
Yeah.
And they found it so damn difficult to beat him. He was completely fearless, and he would stand up to any onslaught. But off the pitch, as you alluded to, Tony, I mean, he was such a popular individual. I must have known Andy Goram, Natalie, for well nigh 30 years. And whenever you met him, he was always the same. He was always upbeat. He was always up for a laugh. He was always up for a drink, and sadly, in those days, I used to imbibe and enjoyed that with him. But his company was exceptional, and he was a generous man. a good man, and he'll be
This is
missed.
it. I'm reading here about it. He'd played in a local charity match at one stage at the height of his fame, and whereas everyone had gone in and showered and done all that, he stayed out there to defend penalties from all the kids that had gathered around. And,
Yes.
that's just the measure of the man, and clearly just wanted to give his time back to kids.
It reminded me as a goalkeeper very similar to Neville Southall. Because he wasn't the tallest, he wasn't one of them goalkeepers that were 6'4", 6'5", and come and collect things. He was as wide as he was tall. He was a big man in front of you. And Neville Southall was a bit like that, but a great shot stopper, and he had great feet. You see the goalkeepers that can move their feet really quickly and get across. Because if you see a lot of these saves, Jim, that you're talking about, it's all about getting across the goal and making, reaction saves.
That's right. Against Celtic, I remember at Ibrox, an incredible save. How he did it, I'll never know. From Pierre Van Hooijdonk.
Yeah. Was that a header?
Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I think it was a header, wasn't it?
At the Celtic end of Ibrox, in the Broomloan Stand, a header.
Yeah.
And how he got to it and tipped it. He was so athletic, and when you stood beside him in a pub or stood beside him chatting, you would think he looks like the most unathletic guy you could ever meet. But he was incredibly agile.
Yeah.
But it was his bravery, Tony. I mean, he'd throw his head in amongst boots. He would to stop you scoring against him. He was many things, Natalie, as well. He would have played more games for Scotland had it not been for Jim Leighton, who kept him out periodically, and that eventually was the end for Andy in terms of his Scotland, his time with Scotland, because eventually Leighton was preferred, if I remember rightly, to Goram, and Goram was like, right, enough. But he had 43 caps for Scotland. When you look at it, 5 SPL titles with Rangers, 3 Scottish Cups, 2 League Cups. And of course, as you remember, Tony, one Premier League title in England when he was on loan with Sir Alex at Manchester United. And I think he just played a handful of games, maybe 2 or 3. But this was it. And intriguing in Natalie, I don't know if you recall this, he loved his cricket.
Yes,
and of course,
I heard about this.
Walter Smith was never that happy about Andy playing cricket because of the fact that he could get injured, and he played cricket. He was a left-handed batsman, but he was a right-arm medium-pace bowler. I mean, how you work that out, I'll
How's
never
he not
know.
A wicket keeper?
That's a great point.
Why would you? You're playing goal. Surely wicket keeper would have been your natural position.
That's almost as good as your observation earlier that Tsitsipas was a doubles partner
but
of Kyrgios.
No, I did get help
it's a case
on that.
of I keep the balls out when it comes to football. I'd rather do something different when it came to cricket. Just vary it up. But yes, I was reading about the Manchester United loan move that he made and how Sir Alex Ferguson had rung him up and he thought it was a joke, didn't think it was him, and swore down the phone, not realising it was actually Sir Alex Ferguson on the phone.
Yeah.
Obviously hastily made up for it and did, as you rightly say, went out on loan and did win the Premier League with them. But what about away from that? I know you've spoken a little bit about his generosity and how he was socially a great guy as well.
Yeah.
But what more can you tell us about the man himself?
Well, he always wanted to give back to those who'd helped him in his career. Even last week, I think I'm fine about saying this, his son Danny told me last week, and I heard this from a couple of people at the Petrov Golf Day, Natalie, only a matter of days ago, Andy ventured out and did a Q&A, would you believe, Tony, in not the greatest of health, clearly, with an invited audience and people like Charlie Miller. You remember Charlie? Ex-Rangers. Was there. I think Simon was there, Simon Donnelly, ex-Celtic. And he had pals from both sides. I mean, strange as it would sound, Goram was friendly with the likes of Lennon and Hartson, but was such a strong Rangers man. But at this Q&A last week, Natalie, or a few days ago, he returned seemingly to his old self and was laughing and joking. People were keeping an eye on him on that night, just watching him, how much energy he was taking out of himself at this event. But he was terrific, apparently, and he was back to his old self. And then they thought, right, we'll leave it at that, because it's taking too much out of him.
Sure.
And then, of course, as I said, Danny, his son, and if Danny's listening, good morning to you, Danny. He did incredibly well, was really brave. I was in touch with him yesterday. The end came, and it came all too quickly. But he'll be remembered by fans all over the country, Natalie, when you think of it. His contribution to Hibs was amazing. Before that, to Oldham. And then at Rangers, he was a legendary Rangers goalkeeper.
Well, Jimmy's tweeted us to say, as a Celtic fan, I hated Andy, but in a good way, because he spoilt many a Saturday for me, and he remembers, obviously, that Pierre Van Hooijdonk save very, very well. He was top quality, he says, and I'm sure there will be, as you say, regardless of what club you support, there'll be many that will just look back and think, wow, what a keeper he was.
Yeah. He'd do anything for you, Natalie. He was our sort of guy.
Yeah.
I mean, many years ago, I was thinking last night at Scottish TV before I went to Sky, I used to host this quiz show, this satirical quiz show, a game of two halves. And Goram came in for that on one occasion. And Tony, I'll tell you, with a live audience and whatnot, he brought the house down. He was an absolute sensation and took it to the brink, of course, with his humour, the old firm humour. And people loved him for it. And it was significant that the late, great Tommy Burns thought the world of Andy Goram. Goram having frustrated Burns and Celtic for so many years. And yet Tommy used to talk in the warmest terms about Andy Goram.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is. I'm trying to find the quote.
Jim, just a quick word on his life after his career football. What did he get involved in?
He did.
He seemed to have ducked and dived a little bit, from what I heard.
Yes, he did. He did. Now, I think those close to him would not argue with that, Tony. He held on to the reputation that he had gone down in history as one of Rangers' greatest. And was all too keen whenever he met people to enjoy a conversation or two about that.
He was in goal against England, wasn't he? When the Gaza goal wasn't Andy in that
96?
Goal?
Yeah, absolutely was.
Did he ever talk about that one?
Well, they were
talk about
teammates,
it,
weren't they?
Of course
and
they were,
they actually, despite the fact, obviously this is the Euros, so it's the international break, if you like, or the summer. And I think it spilled over when they got back into the dressing room, as in at Rangers.
Yes, yeah. I mean, he would always be showing up at charity events, Tony. He would always be there. He would always show up. He was terrific company, and people loved him. And especially the live events, people would come from far and wide, because if Andy's there, you're always going to be entertained. And there would be more than a story or two about what he did in the past for Rangers, for Hibs. And for Scotland, he was something else. I mean, when we look back on it, I mean, his list of honours speaks for itself. He was phenomenal. But for anyone who wants to see just what Goram's contribution was like, get it up today on YouTube if you can. Go back to his performance back in 92-93 at Elland Road when he played for Rangers against Leeds United, and watch what he did to Leeds United that night, and how he frustrated Leeds and Cantona and Lee Chapman and the others and kept them out. And Rangers put out Leeds United over these two legs, and Goram was central to that happening.
You mentioned Tommy Burns. This was the quote I was looking for. He said of him, his ability to perform heroics against Rangers obviously moved the former Celtic manager Tommy Burns to quip that on his tombstone they would write, "Goram broke my heart."
There you are. That's exactly
That's the impact
Natalie.
he made.
Natalie, I'm glad you found that, actually, because that puts it into perspective perfectly. The way he frustrated the opponent, Tony. And even last night, before thinking about coming in to see you two this morning, I had a look, and you were playing at Celtic Park, Tony, and you had a pop against him, and somehow he kept it out. He defied logic at times, as you say. This not a huge goal, not like Van de Sar or like a huge, tall, imposing figure.
Yeah,
but he was in that damn goal and he kept you out.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't give him that much credit on that one, Jim. I was missing quite a few at that time. So
You're too hard on yourself. But we'll miss him, Natalie. He was a character on and off the field, and a warm and a generous man.
The Sunday Sports Breakfast with Natalie Sawyer and Tony Cascarino. Sunday mornings from 6 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.